Hey, Biology 1. It's me, Brandy. I haven't seen you in a long time. Do you even remember who I am? Did you think that your school was over? And they make us come in and start again. Psst. Something about that just seems unnatural, doesn't it? Okay, so here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to go over a few things with you, and then we're going to start in on Module 10. What do you say? We're supposed to be on Module 8. Well, in my class, we typically skip 2 modules, and that gives us a couple of extra weeks to do some tests and labs and things like that, and have some flex weeks. So in Biology 1, we skip Module 8 and 9. And the reason that we do is Module 8 talks about genetics. It's a little bit of an extension of DNA when we talked about that. But then Module 9 is all about evolution. Now, it doesn't teach that evolution is correct. Matter of fact, it teaches almost an apologetics version so that you can explain why you believe what you believe regarding creationism. So I believe that that's a good thing that you can learn from your parents. If you want to at some other time and you just want some really good reading, go ahead and do it. But it's not going to be mandatory for what you need for me. So let's talk about the things that I need to get out of the way before we get started, okay? First of all, today we're starting for January 4th, 2001. It's actually 2021. My son will be 20 this year. I know it's not 2001 because I would be big and pregnant. And I'm not. So, oh, wow. Okay. So here we go. A few of the things that you need to know is that today is going to be virtual. Next week is virtual. Most of y'all got my email. I'm going to try to slip my glasses off for a few minutes. Next week is going to be virtual, and that is Truth Tracker wide. So every class, you all probably know, will be virtual for the next couple of weeks. I have a doctor's appointment this Wednesday, which is day after tomorrow, and I will be talking to the surgeon about making a surgery date for me. So following that surgery, it's a pretty extensive surgery, so I probably will be out for a few weeks. Given that, I'm going to try to do a whole bunch of recording, and our classes will be virtual like this until I'm back in class. And I don't know when that'll be. I mean, I may do really well and feel better in a week or two. No, not a week or two. Maybe 2 to 3 weeks. And then if not, it may take quite a bit longer. But I want to meet your needs. I want to make sure that you do well in class. And I also want to make sure that, that I can answer any questions that you have. So what I'm asking is feel free to text me any questions that you have. But what I would prefer you do is email me. I won't always have my phone available, especially once I already have my surgery. So please email me any questions, and that way I can answer them appropriately. And then if someone has a repeated question, I can just copy the answer over. That would make it really easy. Also, I don't know how it is on your side when you get emails from me, but if you want to, you can reply all with your questions, and then that way everybody sees your questions. Does that make sense? But I don't know if it has that option or not because I send everything through iGrade. So I don't know. But please, I would prefer that you email me with any questions that you have. Okay. The first unit module that we're going to be doing coming back into this is called ecology. Okay. Some of the stuff I'm going to be reading, but this should be a relatively short lesson. We're 5 minutes in right now, so let's see how quickly we can get through it. The one thing I did want to tell you is I want to make sure you know, go through your notebooks. Go through all the work that I gave you at the beginning of the school year with all of your tests. If you do not have the next several module tests at home, you're going to need those. You should have them. I gave everybody the same envelopes. I checked and double checked before I handed them out. So you need to make sure that you have all your tests to do for the next several modules, okay? Starting with number 10. One thing you'll notice if you look at your syllabus is that this test is open book. I like this test. It's a good one, okay? I'm also going to try to come up with an answer sheet to put in the, I'm going to try to send you all an answer sheet so that when you scan me your answers, if all your answers are on the answer sheet, it might be a little bit easier to grade than having to go page by page. So, and it might not save you having to scan 3 or 4 pages, you know, however long it is. So here we go. Page 299. Okay, I got my drink. We're ready to go. This whole module will be done in this 1 week. Like I said, it's really not too hard of a module, and the test is open book. Ecology. Ecology is the study of interactions between living and non-living things. So that covers a lot of stuff there. I mean, here I am interacting on a big table. It's not living. My refrigerator, not living. This, not living. So what we're doing is we're trying to figure out, what do living things have to do with non-living things? How do they work together in our environment? How do I work together with the earth, the soil, the rocks around me? What about water formations? How do I work with those? Well, that's kind of what ecology is. It sees how people are in their environments, or not people, living things in their environments, and it breaks it down into how we interact with all the stuff around us. Okay, now look on page 299. There are 4 vocabulary words there, okay? Population, a group of interbreeding organisms coexisting together. This is specified as like deer in a forest. They are interbreeding. That means deers mate with deers, deer with deer, and they all live together in like a little pack, right? I mean, you can see one deer here or there, but there's typically a few more with it. Then you have a community. A community is a group of populations, like we talked about before, living and interacting in the same area. That would kind of be like deer and squirrel. Now, a deer and a squirrel aren't going to mate, but they can live together, and that's their community. An ecosystem, an association of living organisms and their physical environment. That means, are these things located on land? Are they located in the water? Or were they located in the air? Okay, in the sky? The last is a biome, a group of ecosystems classified by climate and plant life. That's like a forest, a rainforest, a desert. Your biome is the group of ecosystems classified by climate and plant life. So if you say, I'm going to go, my husband's downstairs scaring my kids. That's sweet. So if you heard somebody yell, that's him scaring them. So let's say, I just totally lost my train of thought. Unusual, right? But let's say that I'm going into a forest. What do you see in your head? Do you see sand dunes and big rocky formations? No, you think of trees, right? Forest and trees. So, and the green stuff and leaves and twigs and bushes. That's what you think of when you think of forest. So that's what it's talking about, are the different ecosystems characterized by their climates and their plant life. Okay. Let's see. One of the best examples, look at the very bottom of page 299, and we're going to go through some really cool stuff here in a second. One of the best examples of what happens when an ecosystem is thrown out of balance, it can be thrown out of balance, y'all. It comes from the country of Australia. In 1859, an Australian sheep rancher named Thomas Austin decided that he wanted to hunt rabbits on his ranch. So he decided to import a few, 24 to be exact, rabbits from England where he had grown up. Well, in only 6 years, 24 rabbits to start with. In 6 years, his land had more than 10,000 rabbits. He had hunted to his heart's content, claiming to have killed more than 20,000 rabbits, but they continued to overrun all the land. Now, what happened is that these rabbits were not native to Australia. So when he pulled those rabbits in, it caused an inequality in the ecosystem. Okay? So let's look on page 300. Several species of animals and plants that lived in that region, they all had particular roles in making sure that life can exist there. Well, when the rabbits came, they ate the plants, they broke down systems, and things that the ecosystem needed to survive was being consumed by these crazy rabbits. Like the Trix rabbit, you know. Okay, so anyway. So, by 1883, the Australian government decided that Thomas Austin had done messed things up. So, the rabbits had spread to more than 1,000 miles from Austin's ranch. So, the government says, okay, we got to do something here. So, let's see. What they decided to do is they thought, okay, well, we got to find some predators for these. So they brought in some foxes, let's see, hawks, foxes. Well, guess what the problem was there? The hawks and the foxes, they were not native to this area either. And so what ended up happening is you thought it would take care of the rabbits, but then what would happen when the rabbits were gone? We'd still have these foxes and hawks that didn't belong in the ecosystem, and that could even damage it further. Get it? They're like making things worse. Now, the next thing the government tried to do was hire some exterminators. Well, before my husband became a preacher, his family owned an exterminating company, so he was an exterminator. So that would be like saying, okay, we got to go over there and into Australia, and we got to kill off some of these rabbits with some poison. Well, they spent a whole lot of money on rabbit traps and hunters and poisons. And when that didn't work, they built this huge fence. It was 1,200 miles across, trying to keep these rabbits out. In an attempt to contain all the rabbits, nothing worked. So rabbits were still overrun in Australia. So in 1937, now let's flip back here, 1859, that's when it started. In 1937, that's almost 100 years of rabbits. Scientists had discovered and tested this specific virus that only affected these English rabbits. So, after the research, they found that it wasn't going to harm any other creature. So, they decided to infect some of these rabbits with this crazy virus. So, they infected the rabbits with the virus, and for a while, nothing happened. But scientists thought something had gone wrong. But in 1950, that is 91 years after this whole thing started, 91 years, they started seeing some rabbits dying off. They were dying, and it was turning out that what was killing them was this virus. But the virus could only be spread through skeeters. So the mosquitoes would bite a rabbit, get the virus, and then take it to another rabbit, and it gave that rabbit the virus. And the virus would kill it. And I don't know if y'all have heard, but Australia has some like bird-sized skeeters. So what happened was, that's how they started controlling them. Now, it didn't kill all the rabbits, but it killed them. It killed enough to have manageable rabbit populations. Okay? So, if one creature is removed or added, it can change an entire ecosystem. I remember one time, well, I tell you, it's been more than one time. We have been so blessed. You know, we got a bunch of children, and my husband's a pastor, so it's not like we're big rich people. But we have been blessed even this year with some friends of ours who enjoy hunting. They don't have as big a family as we do. So anything that their family doesn't consume, they give to us. Well, we love deer meat. We love it. We put it in chili, we make roasts, we like grilled steaks, we eat it all. We love it. We love that venison, okay? But people would come up to us and say, you're killing Bambi. Oh, how could you eat that? How could you do that? And, you know, hunters are only allowed to get so many deer at a time, because the reason that they have them in seasons, in hunting seasons, is because if they didn't control the population of the deer, then the deers could spread diseases and kill off an entire population. So we're thankful that we have hunters that can go in, help control the population of the deer, and then turn around and feed our family. So God has provided for us in that way, even when we can't be the hunters, but He's provided those little Bambis for us to eat. Okay, energy and ecosystems. Let's look on page 301. It's safe to say that almost all ecosystem energy comes from the sun. All right? That's pretty easy, and here's where it starts. You have what's called primary consumer, a secondary consumer, and a tertiary consumer. Tertiary means third, okay? So when you see that, I want you to know what that means, okay? So let's look at our little picture at the very bottom here of page 301. Look at that little picture. It kind of goes through what we would consider a food chain. Well, this is called a trophic level. Remember, trophic means nutrition. So, A means without. So if something is atrophic, it means without nutrition, right? So, here we go. Look at the picture on the bottom. If everything comes from the sun, remember our produce, something that you get in the produce department at the grocery store? Those are plants. Plants get their energy from the sun, and they make their own food through their autotrophs, make their own nutrition. So they're autotrophs, and they produce their own food. So it gets its energy to do that, to make that chemical change. It gets its energy from the sun. Okay, that's why we say that the sun is the primary source of energy. Now look, we have our plant produce, like in the grocery store. And then there is a little mouse. Now, that mouse is called a primary consumer because that mouse likes to eat the produce. Oh, then there is a snake. The snake will eat the mouse that eats the plant. And then there's a hawk. The hawk will eat the snake that eats the mouse that eats the plant. So the plant is the producer of the energy it's released from that it's gained from the sun. The mouse is primary consumer. The mouse will eat pretty much only the plant. The snake will eat the mouse, so he's the secondary consumer. He will eat things a little bit lower on the food chain. The hawk will eat the snake, and it could eat the mouse. If it ate the mouse, it would be a secondary consumer. Here, it is the tertiary consumer because it's the third thing that could feed this in the chain, all right? If I ate hawk, I would be the next chain, the next link in the chain. I don't think I've ever had me a hawk. All right, let's look on page 302. Now, page 302 gives us what's called a food web. Now look at it, it looks like a big old spider web. So let's start with the owl. That owl right there will eat a rabbit, a squirrel, a snake, a mouse. But all of those things, the rabbit, the squirrel, the snake, the mouse, they'll all eat the plant, which is the primary producer. So then the next line from the primary producer would be the mouse, the squirrel, the rabbit, or the snake. Okay, so that would be the primary consumer. Okay, consumer, it's what consumes it. Then let's looky over here. Let's see. Look at that snake. Now that hawk and that owl can eat the snake, but that snake can eat the praying mantis, the frog, the grasshopper, the mouse. That raccoon down there can eat the frog, the praying mantis, the grasshopper, and it can also eat the plant. So it's showing you that depending on what you are, you know, if you're a herbivore, a carnivore, an omnivore, depending on what you are, it kind of opens up what you can be in that primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers. All right? Now, using the food web, you can see how some creatures remain at the same trophic level while others vary. Just like I just said, they could be at different places in the food chain. So why are trophic levels so important in an ecosystem? Why are nutrition levels so important? First of all, as we learned from the story of the rabbits that were imported into Australia, every living organism has some sort of predator or organism that will overrun an ecosystem. The second reason is that trophic levels are very important is they actually track energy as it moves through the ecosystem. So every time, now watch here, here's a big old bold letter on page 303, bold letter, little sentence. Energy is lost each time it moves up a trophic level in an ecosystem. Energy is lost. Y'all, I'm going to have to get a rubber band. Hang on just a second. I'm just walking around in my kitchen. I'm getting me a rubber band if I can find one. I bet my kids have done pulled them apart. Here's one. My hair has gotten longer and it is burning me up. So I gotta pull it up. There, I got me a ponytail. I haven't had one in years. I've had really short hair for many years. So I feel like a different person. Okay, so here we go. Energy is lost each time it moves up the trophic level in an ecosystem. How is energy lost? Look it down here underneath there. There are two ways. As you have already learned, when cellular respiration occurs, some energy is lost in the form of heat. In addition, when a fox eats a rabbit, it doesn't eat the whole thing, it only eats the meat and the fat. The fur, skeleton, etc. of the rabbit are not used up by the fox. Nevertheless, it took energy to form and maintain those structures. All of the energy is lost because it does not end up being used by other consumers. So typically, fur and bones are broken down by bacteria, or they're broken down by fungus. Okay? Those are different kingdoms, remember that. Skip to the next page. 304. One of the best ways to illustrate the consequences of energy loss in an ecosystem is via the ecological pyramid. All right? An ecological pyramid is a diagram that shows the biomass of organisms at each trophic level. Of course, this definition does little good if we're not familiar with biomass. Well, that's our next definition, so. Biomass is the measure of total dry mass of organisms within a particular region. Biomass tells us something about how much biological matter exists in a certain region. The ecological pyramid separates biomass out according to trophic level so that you can get a feel for how much energy must exist at each level. For example, ecologist Howard T. Odom extensively studied the ecosystem in Silver Spring, Florida. The ecological pyramid for this ecosystem was based on his study, and it's displayed in this figure. This demonstrates how energy is lost. Okay, I want you to understand that. It's how energy is lost. Now, producers are going to have the greatest amount of energy. It's your first stop. The sun comes down, gives the energy to the plant, to the producer. The primary consumer is only going to take a portion of that energy. Because think about what has to happen. First of all, it's not going to, okay. If I have a cow out in the yard, which I don't, but if I have a cow out in the yard and he is eating some grass, is he digging up the roots and eating all of it? Or is he just biting off a section of it? He's biting off a section. He's not even going to get down in the dirt because he don't want to eat the dirt. So what he's doing is he's going to eat the grass, but not all of it. So he's our primary, okay? Now, our secondary consumer would be me and you. I'll eat me a cow. Most of us will eat a cow, right? So if we're going to eat a cow, when y'all have some ribs, do y'all eat them bones? Do you go ahead and say, hey, leave on the skin and fur, that's the good stuff? Well, if you do, I have the name of a really good therapist, because you probably need it, because you're crazy. Okay, so the secondary consumer would be us, but we don't use all of its energy. So a little energy is lost in that consumption. Then we have the tertiary consumer. Yes, that means that something's going to have to eat you. And I'm going to say that it's going to be a tiger. Because we learned a lot about tigers in quarantine, I think. So a tiger will eat you up. So, but they're not going to eat your skull, and they're not going to eat your bones, and they probably won't eat up your hair. So they're going to start focusing on the other juicy, meaty parts of your body, just like we do with the cow. So when that happens, that is the tertiary consumer. So you can see in this pyramid that the higher we go in our consumers, the less energy is expounded. Okay, so this is the only ones that it's irrelevant to are decomposers, because decomposers are what's going to break down that bone and skin and hair. They feed at all trophic levels, all of them. They actually take care of that energy that is lost. Look at that, I can't do that. My hair's doing some funky stuff. The energy that's lost, they take care of that. So really, no energy is actually lost. It's just something different comes in to take care of the rest, which is amazing and only a gift of God. Now we're going to talk about some really cool stuff, y'all. Okay, let's look at page 30, I can't see, 5, page 305. old lady. Okay. Has to have her hair up because she's hot and has to have her old glasses on so she can see. I'm an old lady, y'all. I'm old. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about mutualism. You remember how we talked about mutualism before? We talked about mutualism as being one of those things that two creatures come together and they both benefit from each other. Okay, we're going to talk about that, and it's a lot of fun. Okay, so has anybody ever seen Finding Nemo? Now, you remember, I'm sure you have. If you haven't, see Finding Nemo because it's really pretty. It's a pretty ocean cartoon, okay? I'm sure you've all seen Finding Nemo. All right. So, Finding Nemo. Finding Nemo is a story about a little clownfish that his parents were looking for a new home because she was going to lay some eggs. And clownfish find a home in these things called sea anemones. And a sea anemone to all these other creatures in the ocean will shock them. And it'll burn and sting. It has like toxins inside of it that when you touch it, it burns and stings and hurts. It's got little chemicals that burn you up and hurts. But for the clownfish, they've got this layer of mucus over the top of it, and it keeps it safe. So Nemo's parents, she lays her eggs in the sea anemone, and that becomes their house. Well, won't tell you much more about the story, but a big barracuda comes along and eats all of the eggs, kills the mama, leaves the daddy, and there's one little egg left, and its name is Nemo. So that's the story of Nemo. Okay, anyway, but the sea anemone is benefited also because the clownfish does some cleaning maintenance around it. It works inside of the sea anemone and it eats some of the gook off of it and it helps keep it clean and it helps nourish it. How cool is that? Okay, let's see, turn the page. I think we can see one. Yep. There on page 306, there's a picture of Nemo and his sea anemone. Okay, now, the next one, this next picture on the right-hand page on page 307, next picture is a blind shrimp and a goby fish. All right, now let me tell y'all about the blind shrimp and the goby fish. They both live in a hole in the bottom of the ocean floor, and the blind shrimp does all the digging. Well, he's blind, so all he knows how to do is sensory feel around and dig. So he digs this hole, and then the goby fish has really good vision. But the shrimp needs to clear the hole and debris, and the goby will go into the hole. While the shrimp digs, the goby keeps watch on the outside. Well, why can't the shrimp do that? Because he's blind. So the entire time that the shrimp is digging, it keeps one of its feelers on the goby to make sure that the goby is there. If the goby sees a predator, it signals the blind shrimp by flicking its tail. It flicks its tail, and they both head down in the hole in lightning speed. They're buddies. They team up. The goby needs a place to hide so that he can look for other things that he can eat and so that that predator doesn't get him. And that shrimp is one mighty fine digger, but blind as he can be. Okay? It's a mutualistic relationship. They both work together and they both benefit. Y'all, this is my favorite one. I talk about this at home. I talk about this at dinner parties because I think it's super cool. Look here on page 308. What a pretty fish. Look at them huge lips on that fish. And see its funky looking tongue? It's not a tongue. No, it's not a tongue. This fish is called the Oriental Sweet Lips because he got sweet lips. And that little thing, that little tongue sticking out of its mouth is a blue-streaked race. Now, here is the gross and cool part about this mutual. I'm shaking this thing because So here's the really cool part, okay, y'all? That fish, that oriental sweet lip fish, has really sharp teeth that go all the way to the back. The problem is this specific kind of fish has dental caries. That means it has dental problems. Its teeth rot out. They get all kinds of gook in their teeth, and they get meat and stuff from what they eat left in their mouth. But that blue streaked race, he goes into the sweet lip's mouth and eats the crud from between its teeth. I know, that's just gross, y'all. I get grossed out when I was looking for a toothpick. I get grossed out when somebody goes, does this and then goes, I just can't stand it. That grosses me out. I am a flosser. I bet you I floss twice a day. I probably overfloss, but I don't know. I just had this thing about things being in my teeth. But I can't imagine something crawling up in my mouth and eating off my teeth. Anyway, so it does. It crawls up in its mouth and it eats all the gook out of its teeth, and that way the sweet lips has clean, good teeth so they continue to eat. And he knows that blue striped race, he knows that he is a good buddy to him, so he lets him go in and clean his teeth. That is a mutualistic relationship. How stinking cool is that? I love that. Okay, now let's go to page 309. The physical environment. We're going to talk about a little bit of these, and I'm just going to kind of breeze through it because it's just talking about some different kinds of environment and how things recycle into the environment. So far, our discussion of ecosystems has revolved around associations between organisms. What eats what, and then how things work together that might be like a predator to a prey, that they work together in mutualism outside of their nature so that they can benefit from each other and live longer. Okay. All right, go to the bottom, page 310. That little paragraph right there, right before the on your owns. Okay? There are a whole host of things that make up the physical environment of an ecosystem, and it's simply too complex to study even in this group. Then why do you talk about it? Anyway, water, oxygen, carbon, and nitrogen are the most important substances in this physical ecosystem. Water, hydrogen, carbon, and nitrogen. By looking at how these substances are distributed in the ecosystem, you'll get some idea of how incredibly complex and wonderful God's creation is. Now, let's look over here. If at any time you need to pause me and go take a break, do that. This lesson, we're at 38 minutes. We're going to be done here in a few minutes. On page 311, we're going to talk about water cycles. Look, I'm done falling out. We're talking about water cycles. One of the most important substances for life on Earth is water. Look at figure 10.7. This is the water cycle of an ocean floor. So what it's saying is, through through some physical changes here, in this environment, look what happens. Let's see. Let's start at precipitation over the ocean on the upper right-hand part of the page. I keep hitting the table. I'm sorry if it makes y'all dizzy and stuff. Precipitation over the ocean. Y'all know what precipitation is? It's rain. Okay? Now, what happens is that the rain comes down. It's probably the last thing. I probably should have done something, started at a different area. Let's talk about transpiration. Okay? We haven't done that yet. Never mind. Transpiration is the evaporation of water off of plants and the leaves on plants. So when you have your plant, there is some liquid inside of the plants, inside of the leaves, inside of the stems. And transpiration is where water is released into the environment from the plants. Now, we have evaporation from the land. Dew, rain, all of those different things cause moisture on the land, and we have it evaporate. Typically, it evaporates through heat, okay? So then, once it evaporates up from the land, can't see my hand, once it evaporates up from the land, then what happens is it develops moisture in the upper atmosphere. When that happens, pressure pushes that back out, and we have rainfall. Again, we have dew, we have rainfall, and we have fog. Okay, those are different forms of precipitation. And snow, but I don't think you're going to have that on this beach. So anyway, then we have the horizontal transport of water vapor. Have you ever seen clouds go by? The clouds going by is the horizontal transportation of the water vapor that comes up, and that comes up in the evaporation off the land. All right. Now, as it starts to precipitate on the land, then you'll have water runoff. So if you've ever been to the mountains, you'll know that if it rains or snows in the mountains, once it gets to the top, it's going to find a stream or a creek to come down to feed larger water areas. And so all of those creeks, you know how they run really fast on rainy days up in the Smokies? Well, when that happens, that is the water runoff. It's running back down. Now, once it runs down, it will end up going into the large water source, but it will evaporate from wherever it's at. Same thing happens at the beach. It evaporates from the water, from the ocean, to the upper level clouds and transports and rains. Okay, and it's just a cycle of how that happens. Look over on page 312. On page 312, we talk about the watershed system. This is the water cycle of a watershed. A watershed is an ecosystem where all water runoff drains into a single body of water. So, let's say you're at a lake, okay, or a river, and there's a mountain body, kind of like what you're seeing here. This looks more like a tropical mountain area. The same thing happens, transpiration off the leaves. It goes into surface runoff. Precipitation brings the water down. Evaporation, it goes up, but it just comes right back down. This happens here. The stream flow is the main water. It comes into a main stream or it comes into a main river. But all of that water comes down one area, and that's what your watershed is, okay? Same thing as before. Now let's look at the oxygen cycle. We've talked about how water evaporates and precipitates. It'll evaporate up and come back down, evaporate up and come back down, okay? So right here we're talking about the oxygen cycle. Air that we breathe. You know, when people say that we can't live without oxygen, we cannot live without oxygen, but it's not the majority of what we breathe. So oxygen that we breathe is only about 21% real oxygen. Okay, so everything else, there's a lot of nitrogen, and let's see, I think it talks about it in the book here. There's nitrogen, there's a little bit of helium, there's argon, there's carbon dioxide, there's all kinds of things up in the air. Okay, so let's look at the oxygen cycle and see what happens with the air that we breathe. Well, let's see where to start. First, let's look at the picture here, 10.9 on page 314. Hey, baby girl. My puppy dog came in here. The blue lettering is the oxygen that is used up. The purple is the oxygen that is restored. So, let's go ahead and start with, the fire, okay? Well, let's go ahead and do the fire and the rusting of metals and minerals. The fire and the rusting of I'll say that 1,000 times. Metals and minerals are both chemical changes. So those chemical changes are things that happen when oxygen is cycled into the atmosphere. So it's blue, so that means the oxygen's being used up. Now, fire. When you have fire, it releases a ton of oxygen. When you have rust, did you know that rust is a chemical reaction, and that chemical reaction is with the water and the oxygen that's released? So what happens is that rust will chemically change what is happening inside the metal, and it will destroy the oxygen. Now, up here, we have the ozone formation and the ozone destruction. Now, ozone, up here in the top paragraph, almost all of the rest is nitrogen, like we talked about earlier in your breathing, and a small part of it is made up of several gases like argon, carbon dioxide, and ozone. It turns out that this mixture of gases is ideal for life. Now, let me see, I thought there was another part that talked about ozone layers. The ozone layer works as a protective layer to filter light in our atmosphere. It also kind of helps moderate our heating and cooling for the planet. So ozone is a really good thing to have. Now, when ozone forms, it uses up oxygen. When ozone is destructed, some of the oxygen comes down and restores the oxygen at the environmental level. Now, water vapor. When water vapor goes up, it also releases oxygen and it restores the level of oxygen. Photosynthesis does the same thing. It just uses everything up. Okay, now, although oxygen is used by all these processes, the amount of oxygen in the air does not diminish because there's also a process in which oxygen is restored, as it's shown in the picture, the little lavender parts of where it's restored. The major process by this happening is through photosynthesis. The oxygen cycle gets used up in many different ways, and the way that it's using the blue arrows shows that where it gets used up. Even through photosynthesis, even though photosynthesis is the main process by which oxygen is replenished, it is not the only one. Remember, through photosynthesis, we breathe in oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide. Plants take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen. That's why it's so important to have our plants. Next, we're going to look at the carbon cycle. Carbon cycle is on page 316. And we are almost done. The carbon cycle is on page 316. As you learned in Module 5, the chemistry of life is built on chemical element carbon. Indeed, in order for the molecule to be considered organic, it must have a carbon atom in it. The carbon cycle regulates the amount of carbon in the ecosystem, principally by keeping careful track of carbon dioxide. So here we go. The purple is where carbon dioxide is produced. The blue is where carbon dioxide is used. What we're looking for here is a balance to where if you produce carbon dioxide, that we use that much carbon dioxide, okay? So look at the different ways that we can produce carbon dioxide. Burning fuel, that produces carbon dioxide and some carbon monoxides, respirations from the plant, and decomposition. Did you know that when something dies, it produces carbon dioxide? The blue. Did you know that the ocean will dissolve carbon dioxide? Yeah, it's amazing. Did you know that photosynthesis feeds carbon dioxide to those plants? Did you know that when you burn a fire, that a lot of carbon dioxide is produced? So the goal is that you have a balance within this cycle of the carbon dioxide being produced and reabsorbed into the atmosphere. Now we're going to skip to page 322. Told you we were almost done. Now we're going to lastly look at the nitrogen cycle. Okay, page 322, nitrogen cycle. Most people know that carbon, oxygen, and water are all important for life on the earth. However, many people don't know that nitrogen is critically important to living organisms. In fact, all organisms need nitrogen, as nitrogen is in many of the chemicals that make up life, that make life possible, like DNA, RNA, and proteins. So it's really important that you have nitrogen, or the organism will die. The majority of air that we breathe, remember how I said the other was 21%? The majority of air that we breathe is nitrogen, 78% nitrogen. It chemically reacts with other substances to form new compounds that are essential for life as well. How do these organisms chemically react? Well, it converts. We have a process called nitrogen fixation, last paragraph, page 322. How do these organisms get such chemically active molecules? It converts nitrogen gas into chemically active molecules that many organisms will use. Sometimes it is done through the physical environment. The intense heat formed in lightning, for example, causes nitrogen gas to react with water and oxygen in the air, making nitrates and nitrites. These nitrates and nitrites dissolve in the water that's in the atmosphere, eventually falling to the ground in the form of rain. Now, this is what's really cool. The next time, well, we've got winter to go into first, but in the spring and in the summer, when we start having those really massive storms and there's lots of lightning and lots of thunder, after the storm, the next day, go outside and look at the grass. It's like super green, and it's all the leaves are like super green. Everything is like a vibrant green, and that's because, man, the grass feeds off nitrates. The plants, everything, all of these producers really just, they cling to nitrates. And I love that photosynthesis happens so quickly that chlorophyll gets jacked up, and it's all because of the nitrogen. Pretty cool. Okay, let's look at the nitrogen cycle here. My kids are throwing stuff at the window. The nitrogen cycle found on page 323. First, let's start with our consumers. Our consumers, we have predation, which means that the consumer like the hawk and the snake are going to eat the mouse and the butterfly, okay? They die. And then on the bottom, we have waste, dead organic matter. Those decomposers help break them down. So then when it breaks them down, it forms nitrates, nitrites, and ammonia. When that happens, you can look to see that feeds more producers. So when something is out in the woods and it dies like an animal, then in the decomposition process, it'll release nitrates, nitrites, and ammonia, and it will help feed the plants around it. Like I said, with the rainfall, it helps give it a boost. It's really cool. And then my little herbivores over here, my mouse and my butterfly, are going to eat the plants. And then the hawk and the snake are going to eat the mouse and the butterfly, and it all starts all over again. That's the full cycle. Now on the inside, you can see the nitrate fixation that we talked about just a few minutes ago. We have nitrogen gas, we have bacteria, we have lightning, all of those different things, all of those natural things in life that give the nitrites a huge boost, okay? Now, that is all for Module 10. Now, we've got it right up underneath an hour. Your assignments for this week. I'm going to write them down so nobody can forget. We have the Module 10 test. It has to be scanned and turned in to me no later than Monday, the 11th at 5 p.m. if you turn it in after this time, it'll be late. If you say, I'm not home, well, guess what? I know that you're not away from home for 7 days unless you call me and say I'm on vacation. So if you call me during the week before this and say, I'm on vacation and I'm not going to be home till the 12th, well, then I'm not going to expect it to be turned in by this day. Does this make sense? So don't message me at 5 o'clock and say, I'm not home. Can I send that to you tomorrow or day after or next week? Because it'll be late at that point. Okay? So, Module 10 test, scan it to me. Like I said, I'm going to work on getting you an answer sheet for that. Okay. You're also going to do your on your owns. Same process. Send me all your on your owns, scan them, get them sent to me by 5 o'clock, January 11th. Okay? In the next few weeks, because I will be having some surgery, your grading will be delayed. That means I will not have your work graded immediately. Sometimes I will be able to. Sometimes I can have a helper that can help me do that. But sometimes I don't. So what I would like for you to do is just get everything in on time, and I will do my very best to get your work to you. All right. 56 minutes. Not too bad, huh? If you have any questions, you feel free to text me, but I would prefer you email me, okay? Try to include everybody in the group if you can, and if you can't, that's okay. Not a big deal. Don't worry about it. So we will see you next week. You'll have another lesson posted. I'll email this to you. I'll try to get it by Sunday night. But like I said, it's going to be a busy week. If y'all need me, let me know. I love all y'all and miss your faces. See you soon. I got to stop this thing.